if you believe that plants are beings, how do you communicate to another being that is not like us?
Hi, everybody. This is Victoria Vesna, and you're listening to Vibrations Matter. I talk to artists, scientists, and everybody who's interested in light, sound, and frequencies. Join me. All right. So, thank you for taking the time to meet and just discuss your wonderful work, talking to plants. And I have so many questions, but I would actually like to start by asking you to give us a little bit of background. How did you get to this place to create this work? What was the path to get you there?
Yeah. Thank you, Victoria, for inviting me to speak with you. So it's been a journey, but my work has throughout everything that I make has this similar interest of plant-human relationships, and that kind of intersects into everything that I'm interested in and what I make. So I'm not a sound artist. I don't consider myself a sound artist. I'm more of an interdisciplinary artist. This piece, talking to plants, and then also instructions for our love performance are the first kind of pieces working with sound as a material. And that there's two things I would say. One is that I talking to plants, the actual sound installation has a really deep interest from my personal relationships with Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and Lakota Sioux people. When I was 16, I was basically introduced into traditional ceremony, and I have had the opportunity to go to sweat lodges, Lakota Sioux and Ojibwe.
And
And
how did that come about? How did you get there?
yeah. I mean, I'm from Chicago originally, the greater Chicago area, and basically I was looking for work when I was 16. We lived on the border between Indiana and Illinois. My father was working at the major steel industry, Inland Steel and then US Steel, which is on the south side of Chicago on the lake. So we were closer to Indiana just because he had to go to work every day, in basically in the area where all the steel plants are at. And then my mom was in public education. So there are a lot of Native people. There's no reservations actually in Indiana or Illinois, in Michigan. So they're kind of spread out. You run into people. Basically, I was looking for work, and I found it's kind of like a trading post. It'd be considered like selling blankets and moccasins and jewelry. And the owner would go to powwows, and I'd go with him to the powwows. And basically, I got introduced into a lot of Native people would come into the store. They would invite the owner and me to ceremony, basically. So I, at 16, was going to ceremony from that. And I'm not Native myself. Don't project myself as anything that I'm not. I just had this kind of occurrence that happened to me in my youth, basically, that has impacted my life, I'd say, and it will, I think, for the rest of my life. A lot of the ceremonies have to do with they involve plants. They use them, they pray with them. they talk to them, and those things, in my mind, I was thinking of the first kind of iteration of talking to plants came out of when I was doing my fellowship at the Lloyd Library and Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it also has this kind of rich history of experimental sound connected to the area. John Cage went through the area there, and Nam June Pike, you have Buckminster Fuller, you have all these kind of rich artists coming from Black Mountain College happening through that area. And that kind of unknowingly also being so close to it inspired a little things, but I also come from a personal background of like music in my family. My mom's a singer. I also sang, I used to be in choir. I, have these things of, my mom plays accordion, she sings, there's this, every holiday gathering, we have accordion music,
Oh, nice.
my mom. And I used to sing a great deal, but I kind of really displaced that a long time ago. I don't really interact with that part of my history, I guess. Like I don't sing anymore and I don't really do those things. I haven't really kind of carried any of that on, but it's still very much a part of how I grew up in my family too. So I wanted, there was this thing of like there's an extraordinary thing that happens with sound and plants. That when you talk to them, when you sing to them, that sound that emits our human, voice connects to plants. And plants, most native people, have a belief that they are beings. You interact with them, they interact with you. So when you're communicating, it's not just that sound is a language too. That also can be a combination of to heal people, to to communicate with them, to bring things that are extraordinary, that you don't really think of in your daily life in a certain way. So
That's right. Yeah, we just pass by plants like they're side views. We don't sense their interconnectedness with us, and yet we owe them so much, and they're so much part of us. But to backtrack a little bit, when was Cincinnati? When were you in residence there? Because that sounds like a really significant kind of other side to what you were gathering from the indigenous community.
right. So right, I was early on. That was like what, when it 16, 17,
Yeah.
up until
But that forms a base. I find that a lot of artists, when you go back, you find like, oh, that was really what the seed of years and years and years of work later happened, but in the subconscious, right? Not necessarily, I want to do this. It's more like you're attracted to it. So,
yeah, and there's also a way of it had a lot of meaning for me, and I knew I was very much aware of appropriation, very much aware of like I don't want to do something that's not of like I know I'm a white person,
right.
being a part of being having this having a chance to have an opportunity to be a part of treated like family, basically. And that's actually very different too. When you talk to some people here in California who are native, and there's reservations, all around parts of California, um, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to have those experiences who are not native. So that's also very difference between when people are in states reservations, and keeping that understanding of community and ceremony and culture and what does that mean. So I take it kind of more, I took it seriously in a way. I didn't want to appropriate anything that wasn't not my own culture, basically. But knowing that there has been things of those have really deepened my understanding of what I think of consciousness in the world, thinking of other, plants around me, thinking of, animals around me in different ways that interact with what I from those experiences. So the fellowship, I mean, I moved to Cincinnati in 2015. And I was teaching at the University of Cincinnati and the Art Academy. Briefly, it was for like 3 years, and then they had a fellowship opportunity at the Lloyd Library and Museum. So that was around 2016, 2017, something like that, if I remember. And in the fellowship, I was connecting with Clay Street Press, which is run by Mark Patzfall. And I was given a solo show along with the fellowship. So the opportunity, Mark Patzfall also is very quite known for making prints for many different artists and working with artists to make those prints. So we made blind letterpress prints, which consider these kind of like scientific appropriation of scientific prints, and then relating those to Anishinaabe relationships. And in that area, Cincinnati has a lot of Native people that I met growing up. They live there. Some of my good friends actually lived in Cincinnati who are Lakota, and Ojibwe in Indiana, right around there. So I actually had an opportunity to actually reconnect with some people I hadn't seen in a really long time. And so it's just kind of a plethora of things kind of going on, like personal, and then looking at professionally, trying to, as an artist, how to kind of integrate everything in my experiences. And I wanted to have the two turntables, the specific turntables, which are Pioneer PL7 turntables, have automatic replay on them. So why would I choose these vintage kind of turntables? But
Well, they're cool.
I was thinking like, wow, they're cool, but they're also you can't find contemporary turntables today with automatic replay on them.
Is that right?
Yes.
Really? That is so crazy. How is that even possible?
It's yeah, so it's the main thing, which had to have automatic replay because I wanted to continually
Of
have
course.
records keep going and going without having any. And that was a main feature of that specific turntable when it came out. So the vintageness it does specifically relates to the actual mechanisms on it. But I found I wanted to have vinyl made. I mean, just in current times, you can have one-off vinyl records made today, which is, for then at one point, there's no way I could have had this piece made. You would have to have ordered
At least 100, right?
100 or 1,000. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's a very expensive thing. So to almost making that very contemporary in a way, you can record a piece and put your music on and put on vinyl. It makes it very contemporary for me. But that goes back to, so in the research, there's layers of things. I was looking at Frances Densmore's work. She's an anthropologist, also known as an ethnomusicologist for Native North American music. And she went around and collected thousands and thousands of recordings on wax cylinders of Native Americans and preserved, Native North American culture. When at the time a lot of their culture was being, dissipated, kind of
Still is.
and still is, right? But so how do Native people go back and find those recordings and reteach themselves the songs that were collected by her in the preservation of that moment in time of their culture. and still hold very true to a bunch of things. So I always found, I was like, oh, that's great. That's almost an act of political activism in a sense too.
Sure.
He was an anthropologist, whether she was aware of it or not. The preservation of a culture and to keep that alive. And how would she know after she's been dead for so long that she would still be used, her recordings today, or the preservation going back to people who, lost their language, lost their songs and ceremony. And I was very much taken by that. I have a book, actually I brought it over too.
Yeah.
She also made a book called How Indians Use Wild Plants for Food Medicine and
Oh, what a beautiful book. Hold it, hold it. Take a
and there's
picture.
been many different editions of this. So
Beautiful. Ordering it right away.
but that gives, she was, she wasn't even known for ethnobotany, right? She was actually, if you look her up, she's known for ethnomusicology.
Musicology, exactly. Yeah.
She spends so much time with, different sets of tribes that she could actually record the plants and their uses of plants too. So
Incredible. I was not aware of that. It's amazing. And on another note, before I forget to ask you, are you familiar, you must be, with The Secret Life of Plants, that
oh
book?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Of course. So that was like early on, right? It probably came into your hands.
No, actually, it
No,
came
really?
late. No. Mine was
Oh,
like way later. That came way later to
oh,
me.
that's interesting. Because
Because
I remember being 16 and reading that. Like, it's just like, it was such a bestseller, such a amazing moment. And then it went dormant. That's true. It did kind of disappear. But now there's more and more science and vibrations and plants, also in relation to pollinators and our behavior. So I'm sure that, but really, you just recently found that book.
was way, I would say more as an adult, like in college,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
true to the book. And I had no idea of it. No one even recommended it to me.
Wow.
I never saw it. So, and then when I did, I was like, oh my God, there's like this other section of things that, you don't know. There is all these different kind of subcultures
Yes,
to
yes.
sound and plants and people's studies with plants and
Mhm.
how they emit sound. So I'm very fascinated by that as well. I kind of like, there's like so many things I just don't know yet that I should, I can't wait to discover. But that book also was very fascinating. Kind of all the things that should not be considered science, right? That has ideas and imagination, things that are more extraordinary, using sound for farming to make plants grow, like what a novel
Mhm.
idea. And then and the farm, the crops did grow, abundantly, what, and is anybody still continuing that research?
I wouldn't be surprised. I know that there's a lot going on more and more with research into vibrations and plants in relation to others, and then also chemistry. It's expanding and it goes back and forth between being considered something not important and important, and scientists sometimes question it because it does enter into this realm of you can't quite explain it in reductionist ways that science talks. So it's definitely out there still very much. And I think there's a resurgence to plant and medicine. And of course, there's a lot of psilocybin and ayahuasca in addition that sometimes wakes up people to just plants around us, you know. So it's all about pharma too, the way they're using plants. It is a very, very complex issue, and the work you're doing really brings consciousness into the discussion ultimately. Like how conscious are we, and what is consciousness, and how is it all interrelated and interconnected?
Right. So you wouldn't think, because there's no, I'm not actually interested in working with actual plants, right? So it is the idea asking how, so there's the two questions asked to each artist that I work with, or a person I invite to make the record with me. What is the idea of a plant, and how would you talk to it? It's just simple, kind of a general, like, and you go off and you make your own sound piece. It could be very literal. You could answer that question very literal.
So how did you pick the artists that you decided to ask that question?
I started off with Demian DinéYazhí, and Demian, actually, he's gotten quite known himself recently. At the time when I found his work, I was in New York City, just on a trip. I was going around Chelsea, and he had a pop-up of his zines in the Gallery Canada. And he had this small showing of some of the stuff. It was him and another artist. And I was just taken by this, like, there's a native person. So in my mind, I'm always kind of aware of, like, looking for native artists, I mean, obviously there's James Luna, there's Jimmy Durham. And I wanted to also write an article at one point on Jimmy Durham. And I'm very fascinated following, like, as an artist, and also looking at native people, what are they doing too? And it was hard because I never really met anybody at the time going through school. Like, I don't see any native artists my age, making different things. So I saw this pop up. Now, that's in 2017, right? So around when that was also the same time I was doing my fellowship in
Residence.
Cincinnati. And he's like, how did this person, come into being? And is it, in New York City? And I just, and I was like, wow, he's really great. He's showing, he was very vocal, very, just an exciting, artist, like putting these words out, having the scene, had this flag that was up, and it had all these things that because I lived in Berkeley for like 10 years, and I said, okay, there's got to be more people like this. So I just wanted to approach this person who, I didn't know at all, and I was very much interested in his work. And I basically just sent him a note and I said, hey, would you be interested? Obviously, he was reading poetry, writing poetry, making up these zines. And I was like, I'd love to hear him, basically speak his poetry. And I basically invited him. I said, I'm doing this sound piece. I don't know what you think. I'm not known. I'm a nobody, like, but
Oh, you're I'm a nobody.
I'm not anybody. It was like what I admire what he was doing, basically. And I invited him to make a record, and he said yes.
What a great invitation for him also to kind of shift the way he's thinking about his poetry and his work. And you probably contributed to his own career, right?
I don't know. He's pretty exciting. He has a
He
lot.
is. He
He has
is
a lot
very
going
expressionistic.
on already. In his own work. I don't know necessarily if, I mean, I haven't really asked him, but I don't think so, personally.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I don't know if that has been an exchange, but I do, for me, I guess there is some admiration of some of the people who come into the collection of records that are made.
Nice.
And interested in what they're doing or what they're saying, in a certain way. I don't know what they're going to do at all. I mean, the records are made entirely where they're given, you have like 18 minutes, which is what one side of a vinyl. And I ask them if they want it synchronized or not. So that's by timing. So we make a piece that's either, it could be 10 minutes, and then they both make it 10 minutes. Or they say, oh, I don't want it synchronized. So we don't know what time we're going to do. And, he made a full 18-minute piece. And he made it specifically, just for the record. And it's a beautiful, not that I had no idea what he was going to do. It's a beautiful piece.
So you basically say, here's what you do. He does the recording and then sends it to you, and you send it off to get pressed.
Right. So I make my piece, and then he makes his. And
He's responding to yours.
No, we're not.
No,
they're responding to the two questions.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
What is the idea of the plant, and how would you talk to it?
Right.
That's it. And I haven't even fully gone over exactly everything he chose. Why? If he, we had an interview together, maybe. Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, what is his idea of a plant? Like, did he choose a plant, or did he talk about it in general?
It's abstract too. I'm not going to give you his answer. His answer is his side of the record, basically.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, and I wouldn't answer that for anybody. So that's where you're.
I love that. I think that's so wonderful that you just bring in their voice and then allow that voice to have its independence completely. That's beautiful.
And then when it's like, it's only played, so I have no idea basically what they're making. And then
you're brave.
And when they send it to me, I told them, just send me the raw file, don't master, don't do anything. And I'm not going to listen to it. And I don't. And I take that file and I send it off to get records made. So that's it. And then the only time the piece really comes together, that's why it's a big, almost like a performance on the Lightbox.
It is a performance. Come on. What do you mean all those?
They're coming together to the two turntables to have a conversation. And you don't know if that conversation's going to work out or not. But I mean, you'll see in each of the pieces when they're played, that's the thing, to listen to each one. They are meant to be listened to. And it alters, the pieces change because it has to go through at least a second cycle through, once their piece is done, it goes back into automatic replay. But if it's not synchronized, you get several pieces in the same piece because they're keep playing over and over again and then changing. But because it's also analog, you're never, even with a synchronized.
Exactly. I was just going to say, even really if you sync them, it's going to eventually go off.
Right. And I love all the flaws.
Yes.
I don't consider them, actually, they're not really flaws. I wouldn't, but people would consider it, all the static,
absolutely. This is where John Cage comes in, right? From your days.
The mechanisms that, is the arm going to go? Is it not? Is the repeat actually going to keep working?
right. This is going to start going.
And so
will it get stuck? Is there going to be a piece of dust?
So there's all these other elements and layers, which I really like. I've made a stage for it, but that stage will change and that performance will change. And I'm like, oh, it has to be perfect. There's no no idea of perfection, really. It's just, making sure that you have the opportunity to listen and be present. Somebody is trying to say something. And it's like making a stage, like I want you to hear what they're going to say, and why am I thinking about plants? I'm looking at this thing, but it's like that other abstract form is like, it's about communication. If you believe that plants are beings, how do you communicate to another being that is not like us? there's all these different forms and different ways, different kind of interactions. And that would be the most thing is like, because I would say it's very hard to say, oh, well, you know, I think some people come up to me and say, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that? You talk to plants, you know? I'm like, yeah, I really talk to my plants. I do, like, but I don't think I'm crazy, you know? I'm not
Do you do tree hugging too?
I have been tree hugging. There's nothing,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some amazing,
No, I think it's a beautiful thing, actually. I encourage people to hug trees.
I've been some of the most gorgeous and oldest forests in northern part of California and even also at Sequoia National Forest. But
Mm.
redwoods in Northern California, north of San Francisco, are some of the most gorgeous forests you will ever just see. They're so tall, so large. Some of the large is like a small house, you know, that you can't imagine. These trees have been here way longer than you. And
Much, much longer.
they have a presence, you know, there is like this, you feel quite small, like, and sometimes it's not bad to have that feeling like we're not really that important, you know. These trees, if they were all cut down, we wouldn't be
That's
here,
it.
you
That's
know,
right.
either. So
And they speak to each other, so there's more and more research about how trees inform each other. There's also research about trees migrating with the climate change, which is a new thing that they're discovering. Tree species are actually shifting their locations through seed, of course. So it's amazing how ignorant we are, actually,
yeah,
as a species. Ignorant and arrogant, I should say.
we're more I mean, the planet, a lot of people say the planet's doing just fine, you know, in a certain way, that it will live longer than humans, you know, that they will now, like, the planet will live and go through cycles. We know, you know, we're trying to help figure out a bunch of things to save it, save us to be a part of it still. But it's complicated, you know, it's very complicated. How, I mean, I guess it's maybe we make it complicated. It's not really that complicated, but there are so many things that we should be able to keep learning. You know, if we're talking about, you know, communication, that, so if the trees are trying to migrate, right? You're saying it's migration, but there's also, they're communicating about maybe how to migrate through fungus and the mycelium underneath the ground, which connects a lot of different roots of trees, that makes communication easier for all the trees to talk to each other, is the mycelium through the fungus. And Paul Stamets, actually, he's a big advocate about fungus.
I love his work, yeah.
And I've known about his work for a very long time. But there's so much to kind of, I think it's this also understanding of the interconnectedness, which that's more of like, how can we try to be and think about being more interconnected, and then that will make us be able to live longer. You know, the Native Americans who were and are, you know, connected to the land still, they're connected to all those things. You know, so the sound of the language is connected to the land. You know, so when I was doing my research for Instructions for Our Love, you go, and I went to language classes, reteaching Korea to the community of the Agua Caliente Reservation, you know, in Palm Springs. And, you know, they bring all of their family. It's free. It's in the casino, but it's free. It's just kids, family, grandparents. You know, it's only a few people left who know the knowledge of their language, who are teaching it back, which is the great grandma, you know, and then there's the daughter who's like teaching the class, but the grandma's right there in the room. And then they go over, there's mountain Korea, and then there's desert Korea. And you're like, well, of course, you know, and then there's different inflections and how you say different words that make you know that they live in the mountains, that they live in the desert. And then just a few little things can say, okay, I already know who I'm talking to. That land is connected to the language. And then when they speak it too, everything around them relates to that land. So that language is it's already interconnected. They put it out there. And then when you're hearing it, it's also a whole other element too. So I really, really hit home when I was hearing that and also seeing the community for the preservation of their language. How do you bring that language to the land? I'm just making it present for people to see. This is the original language of this land. Something, the sound of that is something a lot of people even don't get to hear.
How strange that the casinos seem to be in these reservations, and I just find it very odd and symbolically weird, let's put it that way, if you think about where this society landed the indigenous peoples to support themselves with this very kind of toxic culture that's addictive and yet at the same time gives the power to do something themselves. I find it very strange. Do you have an idea or a relationship or thinking about that, since you're in touch with it more than a lot of us?
The casinos are, I don't know, I guess it'd be good and bad for the community. It's not I think
Exactly.
the origins are for some, I mean, there's thousands of different tribes. Each tribe has their own origins of games and games within their community. Southwest tribes have used different types of a gaming system, which they played early on. I don't have any specific knowledge on some of it, but I know that it does come from it's not something new to their community. So now casino, if you're adding just gaming into the larger, this force, you can see some of the richest reservations of all, different tribes in the United States have casinos in them, basically. And some of the poorest reservations have no casinos. So it's just like anything, it's given them opportunity. They use it as a community space, as you can see, for preservation of their language. They use it for powwows, for gatherings.
Amazing.
And then,
Amazing.
so it's not,
strange mix, huh?
it's you think that one thing is so bad can also be so good. I do think, however they've integrated Western thinking into their tribes. I don't know necessarily if greed and money is actually their kind of goal. I think that's very Western in a certain way. But they have different goals. Maybe they want to just keep their community alive and make their own city, make their own tribal city. It's not about, it's a different kind of goal, I would say.
Interesting. Somebody must be doing a study about that, because I find it I have no opinion about it because it's very distant, but I always found it a little odd that's how the support system landed to be for the richest communities, because it's so corrupting, inevitably. And then there's also alcohol, which is not part of their genes and genetics. So it's very destructive. But then you have the other side of community actually taking it over. It reminds me of Yoruba, or these different tribes in Africa that took over Catholicism and just made it into their own rituals, just kind of incorporated it and made it into something new. So who knows, maybe those casinos will emerge into something else, but the sounds of casinos are certainly
Oh yeah.
Intense.
Yeah, I don't go to, so I say it's in my sound all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speak a bit. Actually, let's go back to the listening. So, a few more artists. Maybe you can mention who you invited, if there's anything you
Sure.
want to relate
Yeah.
about that.
And I don't know if you wanted to, I mean, I could bring up, just to have some images. I could bring some on my website. I can bring up.
Absolutely, please. Yeah,
Those.
yeah. Here we go. These are the two records speaking to each other.
All right. This is Talking to Plants. And we could go to Demian. So I could speak a little bit more about his piece before I play it. His is actually his is 12 minutes and 45 minutes, and then mine's 7 minutes and 38 minutes. And
so when yours ends, his continues, then the record player starts again on yours, and as it moves, it starts shifting, so it's never the same.
So when they start together, you'll hear one piece which is mine, and then one is his. So it's good to his is the voice basically, and then mine's the more abstraction of sounds that you'll hear. And then I'll play it for a little bit so you can hear it, and then I'll kind of
Okay.
go over with that.
Relationships are in the rough now, right? Long since here and if I
ever welcomed light like you from dawn until dusk, the pre-colonial imagination of the future before the future existed, or the fear of total collapse and blackout or drought, a failure of momentum, rivers that get Did I ever put my faith of my survival into your stocks and pistols, like cops with their flaccid pistols, an explosive fire? And were we not conceived in fetal poses? And did we not conceive
It's really super interesting, and I don't know if this is how it actually sounded, or if there was something in the Zoom that ended up getting constrained. So his voice is clear and slow, and your talking was blurry. I could hardly tell what you were saying. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good, good. Okay,
No,
I
no,
just wanted to know.
no. Sure. It's basically I took one of my response to basically him and also those questions was taking one of his poems that he's written before,
I see.
and then I read it, and then I basically flipped it, and it's backwards. So you're getting I kind of feel like it was my honoring to him, and that's how I felt was my honoring to what I was thinking of. I know this person is going to be having this conversation with me, and I also know he's a two spirit, which is with the two spirit in Native culture, they embody both female and male traits, and they have been recognized within Native community for a long time, and honored actually in some of their communities. So I also have been a part of some ceremonies where in Lakota Sioux, they call it like a clown dance, and they allow men to dress up in skirts and dresses, and then they walk backwards or they dance backwards. And I thought in my head, wow, what a great way to kind of, for me, I mean, I have gay friends and I have, relationships with all kinds of people, so it's kind of this way for me to honor like the two spirit community too, that I have seen you walk backwards, and this piece is not gonna be about my voice, and I'm gonna twist it and make it go
Oh,
back.
that's very beautiful.
I mean, that was kind of if you're listening to my thought of how I made my piece, that's really when it comes together and you hear it, that's what it is.
Did you want to share another artist?
Sure.
Who do you
Yeah.
pick?
I'm gonna go back to sharing. And I think it'd be good to give you Kate. She is so not all of the people I work with. Actually, I think we should. Sorry. I'm gonna go with this is a little more personal too. Dawn Jim. Um, she she's an interdisciplinary artist as well. She currently is kind of based between LA and Minneapolis, Minnesota at the moment, and she's Korean. And I asked her to make a piece, and I've known her as an artist in LA by a bunch of different things. And she made this one art piece that had had to do with kombucha and SCOBY that basically interact with different things. So I don't want to ruin her ideas on her piece, but it came down to this idea of symbiosis, and we had this whole kind of discussion about symbiotic relationships, which I very much have worked with in my own work. And so I invited her to make a piece with me. And at the time, we just finished our record. It was during COVID, and my father had died in 2021, and then her father died basically just before we finished. It was in 2022, just before we were finishing this piece. And I said, hey, I think you might need to go back and rethink your piece because your father's just died, and things have changed now. So I said, take your time, we can revisit our collaboration together. And she did. She went through this whole thing of basically 2, 3 months, 4 months. She was in Korea and then doing some things, and then she decided she wanted to remake the piece. So this is what basically both our pieces are almost kind of relating to not only the 2 questions about the plants, but also our own personal relationships that we dealt with in dealing with the death of both fathers within a year of each other.
In dem Moment, in dem du diagnostiziert wurdest, begann ich ein Bild in meinem Kopf von mir als Solokantor in der fortlaufenden Performance eines Vogels, welcher ein Lied in einer Inselschleife singt, zu planen. Niemals mochtest du Musik oder Gesang, aber deine Mutter hat ihn vorgesungen, genau wie deine Frau. Jahrelang jeden Sonntag Hymnen zu hören, muss einen tiefgreifenden Einfluss auf deine Seele gehabt zu haben. Oder so scheint es. In gewisser Weise wollte ich nie ein Lied für dich singen. Ich konnte deine Stimme nie hören und ich höre sie jetzt nicht. Du besangst ein Akkordeon, aber ich habe dich nicht spielen gehört. Es gab kein Lied. Musik füllte normalerweise das Haus, aber es war nur weißes Rauschen, wie das Fernsehgerät, welches du jeden wachen Moment sahst. Deine leidenschaftslose Aufmerksamkeit hat meine Sensibilität für das Leben nur entmutigt. Ich verschmolz mit deiner Innerlichkeit und versuchte, die Kettenreaktion losgelöster Gefühle zu zerstreuen. Während ich versuchte, mich an das Gefühl am Esstisch deiner Gedanken über meine Fragen zum Tod zu erinnern, es gab keinen Himmel und keine Hölle. Du wusstest es nicht und du kümmerst dich auch nicht darum. Alles war vielleicht. Ungelöst von deinen Antworten macht es für mich keinen Sinn, deine leidenschaftlichen religiösen Überzeugungen zu kennen. Unsere biologische Verbindung wird eine ungebundene Verwirklichung gescheiterter amerikanischer Träume und unerzählte Geschichten. Du warst nicht tot, du hast mich nicht verlassen, du hast mich nicht aufgegeben, aber du warst in einem Flugmuster, das nicht die Absicht hatte zu landen oder einen Kurs für die Reise festzulegen. Auf einer kleinen Bühne vor einem Flügel in einem weißen, langen Kleid waren meine dunklen Haare zu Boden geflochten. Mit Blick auf das familiäre Publikum gab es nur einen Brunnen mit all deinen Tränen, die ich nie loslassen oder teilen wollte. Du hast nicht länger gelebt als dein Vater. Du warst ein guter Vater. Du warst mein Vater. Wenn die Vaterschaft einen Namen hätte, würde ich ihn nicht an eine kulturelle Konstruktion binden oder ihn in eine Kategorie mit Definitionen.
So
Yeah.
I was really taken by that one, and I have to say again, I didn't understand, but I started understanding better how to listen because of your introduction and your explanation. How do you expect people to come in with no knowledge whatsoever and take the time to listen?
Giving them a space, a listening room to make some space because they want to listen. That's about it. I mean, we only have, so much time. I'm not trying to like a fast, like what, 5 minutes, give me 5 minutes of fame so you can see my art. It takes a little more time. Listening takes to slow yourself down. You have to have space and give yourself space for it. That's why I like creating a listening event is to, you know, give you that space a little more to quiet. Like you're not going to get it in like, you know, a minute. But
Of course.
there's not, you know, it's not meant to be the final product is not meant to actually be of anything in a certain way because they are made by chance elements. It's a stage for you to try to, you know, is it engaging enough where you want to listen? And what am I listening to? It's asking those like those questions. So her piece, it's not, and it's very difficult through digital means. That's why it's not really that great to, I mean, you can put it in another clip, but you can't, there's two different speakers.
Right.
So you have one voice and you have another voice, and they're at two opposite ends where you should be able to walk around the piece to kind of hear, oh, this is really one entire voice here, one entire, but they're not intermixed together, those two speakers, the sound. So you should be able to hear clearly her piece on one end, and then you can hear clearly my piece on the other, and then the room should fill it with it coming together. You can't really hear hers too much. Hers is a little more abstracted. She took sounds when she was in Korea, dealing with the death of her father, and they had they're Buddhists, and they had it takes months for some of the funerals and the memorials that happen for. I've never been to a traditional Korean Buddhist funeral, but it was months, she was telling me, and she has sounds from the temple during the winter. The sounds are all connected to some of the events that happened, that led up to and happened with the death of her father. And then my piece is not my voice at all, but a different person I asked to be my voice, basically. My father is German, and I asked a friend I knew who speaks German to basically, I wrote a letter to my father, what I wanted to say to him, basically. And it's, you know, she translated in German for me, and you would hear exactly what I'd say to him if you knew German. Would say, but those were the sound of the clock is a cuckoo clock, which I also grew up in my family house.
That's very German family to have a cuckoo clock. It's a must. Well, a lot of European, I should say, Northern European. So just give us a list of different artists. How many artists altogether did you collaborate with for this particular series you'll be showing?
Right. So this is it's an ongoing piece. It's not finished. It has currently 6 collaborations, 6 records. Demian, DinéYazhí is one. Kate Lee Short is another collaboration. Elisa Harkins is another artist. Dahn Jim, and then Anna Hamler. And then my final collaboration, which her record will be released and then premiered, I guess, will be at the closing event.
Oh, nice.
Who is Sitlali Arvifu. And she's also my collaborator and a performer with me for Instructions for Our Love. So she has a beautiful voice. She has a beautiful family too. She's one of the few remaining Tongva people in the LA Basin who are trying to preserve her language for her people, basically. And there is no reservation here for them. They're not federally recognized. So it's like the Kuya people actually have a reservation. They have an amazing casino, and they have a lot of funding, and that also federally funded to support their community too. but the Tongva people don't really have that support here in the LA Basin. So,
Shameful with all the money in this realm, in
there,
this area, right?
I know it would
I mean,
be
it's the richest city in the world, probably.
true.
One of, yeah.
I mean, maybe if anything, this will bring some light, and it's just making it people aware. You know, I asked if she does want to make a nonprofit, but she doesn't know how to make a nonprofit herself. You know, and it's very difficult to. She doesn't come from that much means herself, you know, and her family doesn't have that much money. She, though, is in very much advocacy in the preservation of her land. And her family are actually very long-standing traditional basket weavers, Tongva basket weavers, which are also is really, really cool. I feel honored to work with each of the people I collaborate with, you know, because there's something that I also gain. So I mean, that's what I call like the rhizome state. You know, I have these things of like, what's a symbiote? If you go, you look up some of my work, it's this symbiosis state, you know, or a rhizomatic state. And like, what is that? You know, it's the becoming of rhizomatic relationships, the state of becoming symbiotic relationships. And the rhizome is just how we interconnect and how we can learn from each other, basically. It's not just about me, my work, or all these other things that kind of that they're all a part of this, and how do we interconnect it more to make it, you know, it's like, okay, that'd be great if I could just help to preserve a little more for those things. I would love to do that, and I'm learning so much myself. I don't presume that I know anything.
The learning never stops, and the answer really is in listening to each other, listening to the plants, and listening to you was also wonderful. I gained so much understanding in what you're doing and your process, and also whoever is listening to this will be also understanding better, and maybe even have the experience of physically being in the space with the two turntables. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to kind of unpack what's behind the scenes, and it's very beautiful. I totally appreciate you. Thank you.
For let me be here with you, Victoria.